So let me run through the issues first, because there's a couple of issues here. We've talked a little bit about how to move secrets, in this example, your SMTP password, between production servers and staging servers, or from development through to production, or just via recipes. And a while ago I introduced a PR with the idea of some parameters where you would be able to encrypt them. We'll find later on down here, a little tweak here. And we've talked about it a little bit further, and decided that it would be better if we had some kind of way of encrypting them. And I've been doing a little bit of research and looking at what other CMSs do, and have come up with a slightly different solution to what we've originally talked about. And it kind of falls a little bit into this issue here, which is an issue from Zoltan, to make it a little bit easier to configure your email password, which is normally done in the UI, and a lot of other passwords are done in the UI from your app settings file instead. And the problem we have at the moment there, because there's a couple of people who have tried to do a couple of PRs on it, is that we don't really have any way of demonstrating that in the UI that the setting is, or the password has come from somewhere else. So to kind of try and combine the two issues, well, as I've thought about things and as I've gone through some of the encryption options that are available, it became a little clear to me that it might actually be better if we had the concept of secrets which were actually available in the UI, in the admin, that could come from different providers, which would be able to provide or store the secret and then retrieve it by the module when it needs it, and then move it to other servers when necessary. So I did a little bit of research on what some of the other CMSs do in this kind of area, and Drupal have quite a good kind of story to tell there.
A question.
So, yes.
How close is it from what we talked about? Because every time you are showing a page, I'm like, is it new or is it what we talked about?
It's a little. It's newer. It's newer than what we talked about.
You mentioned CMSs, and I don't remember we talked about what the others do. But it's that's interesting.
No, I've done quite a bit of thinking since we last had an opportunity to talk about it, and done some research on. And some CMSs handle it, some CMSs don't. Drupal had, I felt, quite a nice story. So the reason we've kind of been talking about it quite a bit is because we didn't want to introduce something here into the whole recipes scenario which doesn't meet all requirements and isn't secure. So the idea, rather than having a special section for your password secret in the recipe or anything like that, is actually to have, and what I felt as I worked through it, is that we're actually haven't been doing the right thing with things like the email password. At the moment, they're stored on the iSite property, and each module decrypts and encrypts its own secret there. But I've came to the conclusion it would be a lot better if you had somewhere where they were stored, where they were a secret, where you could get them from multiple sources or store them in multiple sources. For example, the database with data protection encryption, or in, as a read-only accessor through UI configuration, or directly with as a key vault, where you can read and write secrets, but they don't kind of, they are managed by key vault itself. And the idea is to fix kind of this issue plus a few other issues. One of them, for example, if we were to go to make a workflow, we would, if we were making an HTTP workflow, we would generate a key for the endpoint for this workflow. But that key so we generate this key here with a token. This token key here is also unique to this machine. I can't run it on another tenant. If I export this workflow or use a deployment to say this is a recipe, then this key is no use. I have to regenerate it when it gets to the other side. So that means if I've taken this and used it in a form, this form, if I've taken it and used it here, then I also have to update this piece of content with the new key as soon as it leaves my machine, essentially. So the idea was that I had, and it is very work in progress, so it's good to get some feedback on it now before I do too much work on it, is to actually have somewhere where we can store bindings, like, for example, this workflow key. And you'll see there's nothing here other than the idea of where it would be provided. So that when we then go to the form and make the form, we can say, in a new field that I just very quickly put in here, and the idea is that when the driver runs, it will look into the secret service, find the key for it, get the right value, get the correct value, and pass it to the form, which kind of creates like a... Sorry?
Because of liquid or because just this field?
So I've just put this in very short term. It very much could be something that we fetch through liquid.
So this way you don't have to handle secrets everywhere. Just say, no, I handle liquid, and if you want a secret in liquid, fine.
Yeah, exactly. I just put this in for the demo because right now it does absolutely nothing. But the kind of better thought that I was having was that we should be able to just get the key out of liquid. It would be something like this, maybe. And then the same thing would kind of happen in your SMTP settings. Here, again, I've just put another field in here, but realistically, so this one's a little more complicated because there's a bit of migration that would potentially happen. So it may be easier to have a different field for it rather than the password field, but the concept is the same. Of course, because I put it because I cut and pasted that input. So the idea is that, and in this area, as you click Add Secret, you'll get a modal pop up with the type of secrets that you can create. Workflows are special because they need to be generated with a value in the token. So that would be a workflow kind of secret. Email is quite straightforward. That would be kind of an authentication secret. This one I just put in as somewhere where we might potentially store a security key that you could then use to export these secrets with. And at the moment, I'm kind of imagining that there might be 3 different providers. Your standard database provider, a high configuration provider, which just means that you say where it should look to find the secret. Or the other one would probably be Key Vault, because we can very easily write a module that writes directly, can read and write from Key Vault. or a provider for that. So that means that we don't have to worry about how we export these secrets in a recipe, because we don't. We just export the key. And the expectation is that you would either create on the other server that you want your email password with the correct value, which may very well be a different password between production and your test environment, so that when the recipe runs, it will just look up and find the correct binding.
Well,
so that's the idea.
Or you can have an export step to export your secrets.
Exactly. And they would potentially be exported with a encryption key here, and then, for example, when you created the encryption key here, it would show you the value of it once, and then you'll never see it again. So you copy that value and you put it on your other machine as well at the time of creation, and then both machines are able to communicate with each other. So that's the idea. It is very work in progress at the moment, but yeah, any feedback welcome.
So what are the differences since we last talked about it?
So
because I remember we mentioned some stores like database, configuration, key vault, that you can create secrets and define in what store. They are named secrets, and then you can, from the recipes, call some function to encrypt, decrypt, or because there will be a service for that, and also settings for this encrypt, decrypt. But here you could also say, I want to read and write a secret.
So the idea here is from what we talked about last time, was that we would no longer have that section.
Sure.
We would just have a section here which says password key, and then that would say
password key, not password.
Well, it might say
because
it might say password, but we have
either use the password and then have a function to get the password from the key. Otherwise, you have to handle anything as the password, as a key.
Yeah. So that is the problem. It would be a bit of migration to say to everybody, oh, you can't use a password anymore directly, you have to use a key. And it's hard to detect that. Well, actually, it's not too hard to detect. It is something that we could probably handle automatically. So the idea is to really not have a secret section at all in recipes, and just to start using a key lookup, and kind of abstract the issue a little bit elsewhere.
So you could still do it. You could say here, get key or get secret, and then call it SMTP settings key, and it will look inside the secret store it will look for the store of this key to get the actual password during import in this case. You see, get secret, fine, boom. And then, so that will still work with your system.
So that would still, yeah.
Okay, and when we export, you could say that when you render the password section step here, you could generate that, and also a step to export the key, the password itself as a separate step, or not. Just say no. Take the same key on the distant server. It's up to you to add a step to also export the secrets during your recipe.
Correct. You either export the secrets during your recipe, or if you're in a kind of running production environment where you already have all those values, set up on both servers, you don't need to worry about it.
Yes. So yeah, that works. So yeah, I prefer this thing here. And you see the and get secret. Yeah, and there will be more than get secret. There will be also encrypt, decrypt, and then where you can pass a key to use for the encryption key. I mean the key of the encryption key. You see what I mean?
Like the key of the encryption key.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you don't pass the.
Yeah. You'll also have encrypt.
Yeah, or maybe actually it's actually the actual key, but you can do get secret, encrypt off, get secret off my encryption. I don't know but yeah. So there will be different methods to that, and or maybe we said we will use a custom encryption service. That would be different.
So the idea was that if you have stored an AES key in here, then we would probably have an encryption service that was able to read and use that key.
The settings for the encryption service will be able to point to a key here.
Yeah. So the idea was, as I kind of thought through it, I just felt like we were probably making something that was only used in one place, where actually there's a lot of places that it needs to be, or that it could be used. So I call them bindings.
Yeah, I would just call it secrets. For me, it's just a secret.
It will be, yeah. In code, it's bindings, but for here it will be it will just be secrets. The idea being that this will be a drop-down list of providers. So you specify which provider you're in, and if you want to move something from one provider to the other, providing it's a read-write provider, then it will just copy it from the database into Key Vault for you.
Yeah, so yeah, I would call them stores. Like you have secrets and stores for secrets, so secret store and yeah, that makes sense. Okay, good. So name, description, provider / store, which is configured and provided by different modules. So you will have a database secret store, a Key Vault secret store, a configuration secret store, which is read-only, or some other file-based secret store, or whatever your solutions provide. It could be also environment secret store.
Environment will come straight from configuration or binding configuration.
Yeah.
So I've actually, the system's designed to work very much like, or to feel very much like configuration. You know, this is the equivalent of an app settings file or environment variables. And then in the other places, you just perform lookups on them. So we're just bringing it through.
Why you call them bindings now? Because actually what you are seeing is that you want to expose something which comes from the store, but it might be in the store and you didn't expose it. That's why you call it binding.
That's why I call it a binding. In the same way that, you know, you put something in app settings, but you still have to call configure somewhere to configure your options class. So yeah, so something that's in the right section in your app settings or in Key Vault isn't going to automatically appear here. You have to, you know, point to it, say that it exists, and give it a name.
Then a feature like workflow could have a setting that where you will define what store to use to store the keys, for instance, and it could automatically generate secrets in the default store configured for workflows, so that it could generate a new secret every time inside.
Where's my properties button? Yeah, the idea is for workflows, we'll have another button here, which is generate and store, and that will just provide a pop-up, a modal, which will or take you through to a screen where you'll type in the key name for it and choose which store you want it to go into. Or it could be done via settings. So it seemed like a good way to provide a linking between, you know, a loose linking between this and the forms that will actually consume these a lot of the time.
Okay. Let's start with the email password. It's easier.
Yeah,
and you can
we start with one.
Database plus email password just as a proof of concept, and then validate the full path. Also, we mentioned some new parameter in the import export. What was it? Was it the no? Like when you say let's export a recipe, then we could pass. What did we say we could pass? No, not secrets.
So we did think we could pass an encryption key there as well.
Oh yes, so we could so we could define a public-private key somewhere, and then in the settings, and then for the at least the import export, so you could configure, but that might be
We talked about it, and as I worked through it, I realized that we needed a place to store those.
So that's the same story. I understand. So here you will store the public key as a secret here, and then in the call of the recipe, the get secret or the decrypt encrypt will use this key. So that will work. I see. That makes sense. So on the server side, you create a private key. You have a tool that lets you create a private public key there. Then on the server side, you store the private key as a secret in this screen. On the client side, you store the public key as a secret here. Then when we generate the recipe, we use the public key, okay, to encrypt everything. And we can even store the password encrypted in the recipe. And then, or using the method called that is password key, we know. And then on the server side, when it's reading, it has to read decrypt the payload using the private key. So that's still doable using your technique. But this is something to also test with the email password to be able to use this public private key. Yeah. Unless you just do private, whatever, but
it'll probably have to be private because private public is limited to 4,096 bytes. So normally it's used as a signing.
The key itself.
The amount it can encrypt.
Seriously?
So normally what happens is you will sign the document with the private key or the public key, but actually encrypt it with a symmetric key, which is this one here, the AES.
Might be right, but I don't believe you at all. This limitation.
I went into quite a lot of with Kevin, and
okay.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet, but we needed to get to a point. I felt we needed to get to a point where we actually have a place to store them first, and then we can work through from there. But once we got to the point where we can actually use an email password as a key, we don't need to pass the password around anymore.
If you do that, yes, because you have stored the password also on the server side. But if you want to transfer the password itself,
and then we'll have to do the encryption bit.
Yeah, and that might be two different export steps for email. Like, related to the configuration export that Zoltan created, the issue. We said, okay, let's do the automatic export for the things that are not encrypted first, and we did that. Now, what we need is new steps for the email password, and we might have different steps. One that will just export the key, like the email password string, and one that will actually export the password encrypted, as long as you have the private key on the server also, on the other side. Yeah. There might be different steps depending on how you want to export something, even if it's the same thing.
Exactly, and that can work well.
That would be right. A great example.
Cool. Well, thank you all for listening to that one.
Thank you for not forgetting about it. I forgot about it.
Yeah, no, it's slowly on the back burner. But I think this will be useful. I think we can. I'll proof of concept at first, and then we'll see how we go.
And you mentioned Drupal. What does Drupal do?
So Drupal have a module called the key module, which does not too far off what I've described, where they have a development configuration key provider, which is a file environment, or they use something like Key Vault on the other platform. And then the other modules, including their encryption module, can look into this Keystore to get keys, and same with things like their SMTP service. Some of the issues, or some of the stuff with the Drupal one is, I think this configuration one, the development one, is not encrypted, so it's just plain text. But I think we would probably always store it encrypted.
At the same time, that's the case already today with the site settings where you put a key inside, it's just plain text, it's not encrypted. The idea being that if you have access to the file system, well, you have all the power to get the connection string, to get everything, or to run a command to get environment viable. So that's the idea. But some people don't want that, so they want to encrypt and to store their secrets somewhere else. So that's a valid solution for some people, to just have the key in a configuration file. Again, look at the connection string that is usually in the configured in the app settings JSON and encrypted. That's how you do that. So.
Yeah, and one of the providers for this one potentially could even be the tenant's app setting.json file.
Or it could be the value. Store, no, local. Yeah, because when you store in database, you still need a key if you want to encrypt it, or you don't encrypt it. So
yeah, I think when we store in the database, we put it in through data protection. Then it's bound to the site, which seems reasonable.
Yeah, and in the multi-node environment, you need the same data protection. That's okay. The same keys across your node, which makes sense.
Yeah, or you put it in Key Vault and you make your nodes talk to the same Key Vault server.
And I like it. That's okay. That's extensible. People put the level of security they want. That's good. Okay. I think we still need a simple service in a module to be able to encrypt, decrypt, and with the settings that will point to your key store to define what is a key for encryption, decryption. But as a developer, you can encrypt, decrypt easily using just a service. You don't have to say anything, just encrypt, decrypt, and then the settings will let you define what is a key.
Yeah, I agree. We do need that, and that's reasonably easy once we have a key store.
That should be part of the module, actually. The key management module will provide the encrypt, decrypt methods.
Yeah, that's probably the easy bit. The difficult bit's always storing the keys and transferring them around.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.